All right. Now let's see another way of reading files where we can read a file line by line by using file.readline function or using for loop. Okay, again, file.readline function or using for loop. Let's see an example of writing this code by using for loop. So first of all, you have to write file equals to open function, just like before. Okay, open function, just like before. Okay, so as our file, our text file and code file, which is basically Python file, are in the same directory, so we are just giving information.txt. Okay, just like before, we already have shown these things. So information.txt. okay, and our mode is basically read mode. Okay, so R. Okay, now in the next line you have to write for loop, which is for line, okay, line in file colon, okay, in file colon. All right, and within the loop you have to write print, and inside print line. Okay, at last you have to close your file by writing file dot close function. Okay, file dot close function. Now for this loop method, we'll print file line by line. Okay, so first of all this line, then this line, then this line, and lastly this line. Okay, like first of all it will print the first line, and then the second line, and then the third line, and lastly the last line. Okay, so this is the task of the for loop here. Now let's print it. So if we run it, so here we can see we are getting the information. Okay, so we are getting the output here. So Bob age 32, profession builder, and so on. Okay, all right. Now another method of reading file line by line is writing print read line method. Okay, print read line method. All right, so we have to print this method manually. All right, the difference between for loop and using this method is here we are not printing all the lines of our file. Okay, we are not printing the whole things of our file. Here we are just printing or reading lines as our wish or based on our demand. For example, we want to read the first 2 lines, okay, of our file. For this reason, we have to write print file.readline for 2 times, so that first 2 lines should be printed, or the program will print only first 2 lines. Okay, so let's try this one, right? So instead of for loop, we are now writing print file dot read line. Okay, and then again print file dot read line again. Okay, read line again. Now what we have to do, we have to close the file. So file dot close. All right, now let's run it. So if we run it, okay, so we can see we are getting first 2 lines as our output. Okay, first 2 lines. So name Bob, age 32. So what if we give another print here? So file dot read line. Okay, and then again if we run it, okay, so we are getting 3 lines here. Okay, so 3 times file dot read line, 3 times file dot read line, and we are getting 3 output here. Now if you look closely, you will see that we are getting extra spaces. Okay, extra spaces between the 2 lines of our output. We will surely discuss it later on. Now we can read the files as a list where each line is an element of the list. Okay, If you remember, list has already been discussed. Now for writing in such a way, we have to write file.readLines function, which stores the information of the file, okay, which stores the information of the file as a list, and all the list methods can be applied here, okay, can be applied here or on it. Let's see this by writing example of codes. First of all, as usual, we have to open a file and we have to write file equals to open function, okay? So file equals to open, and inside it we have to give our file name. So it's information dot txt, and the mode is reading mode, okay, so R. Then in the second line we have to write lines equals to, so lines equals to file dot read lines, okay, read lines function, file dot read lines function. And next line we have to print lines. All right, we have to print lines. Okay, now so that the lines of our file will print as a list. Okay, so the lines of our function will print as a list. And lastly, we have to close the file as before. Okay, so file dot close, okay, file dot close function we have written here. Okay, so to is basically to stop the file operation. Please note that this one is file dot read lines function, okay, file dot read lines, not read line just like before. Okay, here in case of file dot read line, in the previous slide we have used file dot read line, okay, but now we are using file dot read lines to get the output as a list. Okay, so now let's run it. All right, so if you run it, we can see that we are getting a list here. Okay, as you can see that here the output is showing just like a list, because the output is within the third bracket, okay, within the third bracket, and this is the property of a list within the third bracket, and this is the property of a list, and every lines are separated by commas. So this information comma, profession comma, okay, so this is basically a list. We also can write the same code by using for loop. Okay, so here you can see that we have performed the same operation by using for loop. Okay, just we have to write an extra line, which is for line in lines. Okay, so let's change it. All right, so let's change it. So here we have to write, instead of print lines, let's write for line in lines. Okay, so this lines is basically these lines. Okay, all right, so then colon. So inside it we just have to write print line. Okay, so let's run it. All right, so we are getting the same output. Okay, we are getting the same output. In such a way it will print the lines of our file line by line. Okay, so it will print line by line. All right, now let's pause the video here and think about for a minute. Did you notice something odd what we have learned so far in this lecture? Well, there is a thing that you should notice. When read line, extra lines were printed when read line or read lines function were used. Okay, please remember or keep that in your mind, that the print method automatically enters another new line. Okay, it automatically enters another new line. It means when we are using read line or read lines function, one extra white line are being added in between two lines. Okay, which means after every line of your file, there was an extra new line or white lines were automatically added in your output. That is why there was a huge space between two adjacent lines, okay? Between this line and this line, and this line and this line. So between name and age and profession, and lastly, profession and email, okay? So how to remove those extra white lines, okay? So to remove those extra white lines from our output, we can write our code in such two ways, okay? For example, one way is to use end equals to string, all right? End equals to string. Like if we use print line, end equals to double quotation, okay? So comma, end equals to double quotation, okay? All right, then there will be no more extra white lines and your output will show line by line. Okay, so let's see it. So if we run it, all right, see? Okay, so you have to use end equals to double quotation, end equals to double quotation. Okay, another way to remove extra white lines is to use rstrip, which you have learned previous lectures. Rstrip means write strip method, okay? Okay, so to remove extra space, all right? So here, instead of end equals to, we are writing now rstrip, okay? So we are erasing it and we are writing line dot r strip, okay? So now if we run it again, no space here, all right? So thus we can remove the gap or extra white line space in between two lines from our output, okay? So this is really a nice technique actually, isn't it? All right. Okay, so till now, we only talked about reading the file. But now we are going to start another new topic, which is called file writing. Now, if we want to update the information of the previous text file, okay? Again, if we want to update the information of the previous text file in order to write new things, then we have to use file.write function. All right, file.write function. Now let's see an example. So this time, to write something in a text file, we have to use W mode, okay? Just like this one, W mode. So basically, W mode represents the write mode. So now, file equals to open function, just like before, and inside it, we have to write the name of our file, text file, which is basically information, okay? So information.txt. Okay, so don't forget that both my text file and the Python file are in the same directory, okay? Just like before, we have already shown these things many times. So the notepad, the text file, and the Python file are in the same directory. Okay, now let's put the mode here. So it's W, that means write mode, okay? Write mode. Now let's write something. Let's say file dot write, and inside it I want to give a string or information such as did I erase everything /n, okay? And again, file dot write, and inside it, yes, all the data is lost /n, okay? Now let's close the file. So file dot close. Okay, Now, finally, let's try to run it. So if we run it, something basically happened. Now let's do one thing. Let's open our information.txt file. Okay, information.txt file. That means this file. All right, so if I open my information.txt file, so it's basically this one. So what we could see here, as you can see, all the previous data has been lost and new data has been updated in the file. Okay, so the previous data was this one. Okay, so Bob, age 32, profession builder, email, Bob the builder, and all the data has been lost. So this is our present data. Okay, so we basically updated the data, okay, or information. Now if we would like to store both old and new information in the same file, then we just have to use the same operation as before. Okay, so that means this operation. But what will be the changes here? We have to write a mode here, a mode, which represents append mode, instead of W mode, which basically represents write mode. Okay, so now if we run it, something happened. Let's see what actually happened here. So now if we open our text file, we can see the new information. That means this information has been added with the previous information. So let's check it. So if we open my information file, okay, so these are the previous information and these are the new information. Okay, so we have written it here with append, by using append. So there is basically, what is the benefit of this? There is no data loss type things actually occurred.